Chapter 11. After the meal was finished and we were sitting around the table, one of our party asked how the room was warmed. Emil said, "The warmth that you feel in this room comes from a force that we are all able to contact and use. This force or power is higher than any of your mechanical force or power but can be contacted by man and used as light, heat, and power even to the driving of all mechanical appliances. It is what we call a universal force. If you were to contact and use this force, you would call it perpetual motion. We call it universal power, God power, supplied by the Father to work for all His children. It will turn and move every mechanical device, furnish transportation without the consumption of fuel in any way, and will also furnish light and heat. It is everywhere present without money or price and can be contacted and used by all." One of our party asked if the food had been prepared by this force. We were told that the food came prepared as we had eaten it, direct from the universal, just the same as the bread and the other provisions had been supplied heretofore. We were then invited by Emil to accompany the group to their home, about 200 miles distant, where we would meet Emil's mother. He went on to say, "My mother is one who has so perfected her body that she was able to take it with her and go on and receive the highest teachings. Therefore she is living in the invisible at all times. She is doing this from choice as she wishes to receive the highest, and by receiving the highest teaching she is able to greatly assist us. In order to make this clear to you, I might say that she has gone on until she has reached the celestial realm, as you would call it, the place where Jesus is. This place is sometimes called the seventh heaven. To you I suppose this suggests the mystery of mysteries. Let me say that there is no mystery about it. It is a place in consciousness where every mystery is revealed. Those who have reached that state of consciousness are outside the mortal vision, but they can return and converse and teach those who are receptive. They can come in their own bodies, for they have so perfected their bodies that they can go where they will with them. They are able to return to earth without reincarnation. Those who have passed through death are obliged to be reincarnated in order to return to earth with a body. This body was given to us as a spiritual, perfect body, and we must so see and keep the body in order to retain it. Those who have left the body and have gone on in spirit now realize that they must again take up a body and go on and perfect it. It was arranged, before leaving the table that evening, that the party should divide into 5 groups, each group in charge of one of the 5 that had appeared in the room and taken dinner with us. This would enable us to cover a larger field and would greatly facilitate our work, and at the same time it would enable us to verify such things as traveling in the invisible and thought transference. This plan would give us at least 2 of our men in each party and one of the 5 as leader. We would be quite widely separated. Yet we were to keep in touch through those who were so greatly befriending us and giving us every opportunity to prove their work. Chapter 12. The next day all details were arranged and 3 of our party, including myself, were to accompany Emil and Chast. The morning following found each party with its guide and attendants all ready to depart in different directions, with the understanding that we should carefully observe and record all that occurred, and should meet 60 days later at Emil's home in the village just spoken of, 200 miles distant. We were to keep in communication with each other through our friends. This was accomplished each evening by these friends conversing with each other or traveling back and forth from party to party. If we wished to communicate with our chief or with any other member of our party, all we need do was to give our message to our friends, and in an incredibly short time, we would have the answer. In giving these messages, each would write them out in full and note the time to the minute on each message, then when the answer came we would do the same. When we came together again, we compared notes and found that all noted corresponded. Aside from this, our friends would travel from one camp to another and converse with us. We kept accurate records of these appearances and disappearances, also we noted the time, the place, and the conversations, and all checked fully when we compared notes later. At times after this we were widely separated. One party would be in Persia, one in China, one in Tibet, one in Mongolia, and one in India, always accompanied by our friends. At times they traveled in the invisible, as we called it, distances as great as 1,000 miles, and kept us informed as to the happenings and progress in each camp. The destination of the party to which I was assigned proved to be a small village to the southwest. Located on an elevated plateau well up in the foothills of the Himalayas and about 80 miles from our starting point. We did not take any provisions for the trip, but we were amply provided for at all times and had very comfortable quarters. We arrived at our destination early in the afternoon of the 5th day, were greeted by a delegation of villagers, and shown to comfortable quarters. We noted that the villagers treated Emil and Jast with the utmost reverence. We were told that Emil had never visited the village but that Jast had been there before. The occasion of his first visit was in response to a call for help to rescue 3 villagers from the fierce snowmen that inhabit some of the wildest parts of the Himalayas. This present visit was in response to a similar call and also to minister to the sick who could not leave the village. These so-called snowmen are outcasts and renegades who have lived in the snow and ice regions of the mountains until they have developed a tribe that is able to live in the mountain fastnesses, without contact with any form of civilization. Though not numerous, they are very fierce and warlike and, at times, capture and torture those who are unfortunate enough to fall into their hands. It proved that 4 of the villagers had been captured by these wild snowmen. The villagers, being at their wits' end to know what to do, had sent out a messenger to get in touch with Jast, and he had come to the rescue, bringing Emil and us along. Of course, we were all excited, thinking we were to get sight of these wild people, whom we had heard of but supposed did not exist. We at first believed that a rescue party would be organized and we would be allowed to join. But these hopes were shattered when Emil announced that he and Jast would go alone and that they would go immediately. In a few moments they disappeared and did not return until the second evening, with the 4 captives, who told weird tales of their adventures and of the strange people that had captured them. It seems that these strange snow people go entirely naked, that their bodies have become covered with hair like that of a wild animal, and that they can withstand the intense cold of the mountain altitudes. They are said to move over the ground very swiftly. In fact, it is claimed that they are able to pursue and capture the wild animals that live in the region that they inhabit. These wild people call the masters the men from the sun, and when the masters go among them for the prisoners they do not resist. We were also told that the masters had made a number of attempts to reach these wild people, but these attempts had come to naught because of the fear in which the people held them. It is said that if the masters do go among them, the snowmen will not eat or sleep, but stay in the open night and day, so great is their fear. These people have lost all contact with civilization, even forgetting that they had ever contacted other races, or that they are the descendants from them, so far have they separated themselves from others. We were able to get Emil and Jast to say but little about this strange wild tribe, nor could we influence them to take us to them. When we questioned, the only comment was, "They are God's children, the same as we are. Only they have lived so long in hatred and fear of their fellow men, and they have so developed the hatred and fear faculty that they have isolated themselves from their fellow men to such an extent that they have completely forgotten they are descendants of the human family, and think themselves the wild creatures they appear to be. They have gone on in this way until they have even lost the instinct of the wild creatures, for the wild creature knows by instinct when a human being loves it and it will respond to that love. All we can say is that man brings forth that which he gazes upon and separates himself from God and man, and in this way he can go lower than the animal. It would serve no purpose to take you among them. It would, instead, harm those people. We are in hopes someday to find someone among them who will be receptive to our teaching and in this way reach them all." Chapter 13. We prepared to return to the village where we had left my associates. I found that Emil and Jast wished to go to another small village, located in the valley about 30 miles from where our trail left the valley trail. I suggested that they go and I accompany them. We camped that night at a sheepherder's lodge and were up and started early next morning in order to reach our destination before dark the next day. As we were walking, we were not able to use horses on the trip to the temple and so had left them at the village. About 10 o'clock that morning there came on a heavy electric storm and it looked as if there would be a downpour, but no rain fell. The country through which we were passing was quite heavily, thick, dry grass. The country seemed exceptionally dry. The lightning ignited the grass in a number of places and before we knew it, We were virtually surrounded by a forest fire. In a few moments this fire was raging like mad and closing in upon us from three sides with the swiftness of an express train. The smoke was settling down in thick clouds and I became bewildered and panic-stricken. Emil and Jas seemed cool and collected and this reassured me somewhat. They said, "There are two ways of escape. One is to try to get to the next creek, where there is water flowing through a deep canyon. If we can reach this canyon, which is about 5 miles away, we can in all probability make ourselves safe until the fire has burned itself out. The other way is to go on through the fire with us if you can trust us to take you through." Instantly all fear left me, as I realized that these men had proved true in all emergencies. Throwing myself, as it were, wholly upon their protection, I stepped between them and we proceeded on our way, which seemed to be in the direction the fire was raging the most. Then immediately it seemed as if a great archway opened before us and we went on directly through that fire, without the least inconvenience, either from smoke or heat, or from the burning brands strewn along the trail under our feet. There were at least 6 miles of this fire-swept area that we passed through. It seemed to me as if we were as calmly walking along that trail as though there were no fire raging around. This went on until we crossed a small stream and then were out of the fire. While we were going through the fire, Emil said to me, "Can you not see how easy it is to use God's higher law to replace a lower one when you really need a higher? We have now raised the vibrations of our bodies to a higher vibration than that of the fire, and the fire does not harm us. If senses mortal could see us now, they would think we had disappeared, when in reality our identity is as it has always been. In reality we actually see no difference. It is the concept of the mortal senses that loses contact with us. Could they see us as we are, no doubt they would think we had ascended. In reality that is what happens. We do ascend to a plane of consciousness where the mortal does lose contact with us. All can do the same as we are doing. We are using a law given us by the Father to use. We are able to use this law to convey our bodies through any space. This is the law we are using when you see us appear and disappear, or, as you call it, annihilate space. We simply overcome difficulties by raising our consciousness above them, and in this way we are able to overcome or to come up over all limitations that man in mortal consciousness has placed upon himself. To me it had seemed as if we were going over the ground with our feet just touching it. When we were safe across the stream, out of the fire, my first impression was that I had awakened from a deep sleep and had dreamed this. But I gradually awoke to the realization of it all, and the real meaning of it began to dawn upon my consciousness. We found a shady place on the bank of the stream, ate our lunch and rested for an hour, then went on to the village. Chapter 14. We stopped in a village 3 days. During these days a wide vista of the past unfolded before me. I could see these teachings going back in the dim past to the very beginning, whence all came forth from the one source or substance, God. I could see the different offshoots of these teachings being put forth by individuals, each individual adding his concept, each thinking it was his. Revealed to him by God, or direct revelation from God to him alone, each feeling that he had the only true message and that he was the only one to give his message to the world. In this way the mortal concepts were mixed with that of the true revelation intended, and diversity and inharmony resulted. Then I could see these people, the masters, standing firmly on the rock of true spirituality, perceiving that man is truly immortal, sinless, deathless, unchanging, eternal. The image and likeness of God. It seemed to me that further research must prove that those great people have preserved and handed this truth down the long ages in its unadulterated state. They do not claim to have all there is to give, nor do they ask anyone to accept anything, unless they can prove the words themselves and do the work the masters do. They do not claim any authority save the actual works they do. Quite a number of the people from the surrounding country had congregated at the village for healing. As couriers had gone out with the tidings of the rescue of the 4 who had been captured by the snow men. We stopped over the next day and attended the assembly and saw some remarkable cures. One young woman about 20 years of age who had had her feet frozen the previous winter had them restored. We could actually see the flesh grow until they were normal, and she walked with perfect ease. 2 blind people had their sight restored. One of them, we were told, was born blind. There were a number of minor cases healed. After the assembly we asked Emil whether there were many converts. He said a great many were really helped, and in that way their interest was aroused. They would for a time become workers, but the greater part of them soon fell back into their old ways of living, as they found it would be too much exertion to take up the work in earnest. The people nearly all live an easy, carefree life, and there seems to be about 1% of those that profess to believe that are really in earnest. The rest depend entirely upon others to help them when they get into trouble. Right here is where a great deal of their trouble lies. The masters say they can assist everyone that really desires help, but they cannot actually do the work for anyone. They can tell others of the abundance in store for them, but, to be actually one with and of the abundance, each individual must accept and prove it for himself by actually knowing and doing the works. Chapter 15. We had been seated but a few moments when a man whom we judged to be about 35 appeared suddenly in the room. He was introduced to us and all shook hands with him. We were all spellbound at his appearance, for we had imagined that he would been very old. He was above the medium height, with rugged features, but the kindliest face I had ever looked upon. There was strength of character back of every move. His whole being emanated a light that was beyond our power of comprehension. Before we were seated, Emil, Jast, and the two strangers clasped hands in the center of the room and stood in perfect silence for a few moments. Then all were seated, and the one who had appeared in the room so suddenly began by saying, "You have asked for this interview in order to get a better understanding of the documents that have been read and interpreted for you. I will say that these records were made and kept by me. And those referring to that great soul, John the Baptist, which seemed to surprise you so greatly, are actual occurrences of the time he was with us here. These records show that he was a man of wide knowledge and wonderful intellect. He perceived that our teaching was true, but he apparently never came to the actual realization, for, had he done so, he would never have seen death. I have sat in this room and heard John and my father converse, and it was here that he received much of his teaching. It was here that father passed on and took his body with him, and John beheld his passing. There are none of my family on father's or mother's side that have not taken their bodies with them in passing. This passing means the perfecting of the body spiritually until one becomes so conscious of the deep spiritual meaning of life or God that one sees life as God sees it. Then one is privileged to receive the highest teaching, and from this realm one is able to help all. We never descend from this realm, for those who have reached this place never wish to descend. They know that life is all progress, a going forward, there is no turning back, and none wish to do so. All are reaching out to help those that are striving for more light, and the messages that we are continually sending out into the universal are being interpreted by God's children who are receptive in every part of the earth today. This is the prime object of reaching this realm or state of consciousness, for we are able to help all in some way. We can and do talk with and instruct those who are receptive and who raise their consciousness, either through their own efforts or the assistance of another. Another cannot do the work for you, nor can another carry you along indefinitely. You must decide to do the work for yourself, then do it. Then you are free and self-reliant. When all come into the consciousness, as Jesus did, that the body is a spiritual body and indestructible, and hold themselves in this consciousness, then we shall be able to communicate with all and give out the teaching we have received to a greater number. We are privileged to know that all can accomplish all that we have accomplished and, thereby, solve every problem of life. And that which has been looked upon as difficult and mysterious will be found simple. I do not seem any different to you from any other man that you meet every day, neither do I see any difference in you. We said we thought we could see something far finer in him. He answered, that is only the mortal as compared with the immortal of man. If you would only look for the God quality and not make any comparison, you would see every human being as you see me. Or by looking for the Christ in every face you would bring forth the Christ, or God quality, in all. We make no comparisons, we see only the Christ or God quality in all at all times, and in that way we are out of your vision. We see perfection or have perfect vision, while you see imperfection or have imperfect vision. Until you are in contact with someone who is able to instruct you, until you can raise your consciousness where you can see and converse with us as you are now doing. Our teaching seems only inspirational in nature. It is not inspiration when we are conversing or attempting to converse with one. This is only in the nature of instruction leading to the point where the true inspiration can be received. It is inspiration only when it comes direct from God and you let God express through you, then you are with us. The ideal image of the flower in minutest detail is within the seed and must expand, multiply, unfold, and be wrought into the perfect flower by hourly preparation. When this inner image is complete in minutest detail, the flower comes forth beautiful. Just so God holds the ideal image of every child in mind, the perfect image through which He wishes to express. We can get more out of this ideal way of expression than the flower does if we will but let God express through us in the ideal way He has conceived for us. It is only when we take things into our own hands that the problems and difficulties begin. This is not for one, or a few, this is for all. It has been shown us that we are not different from you. It is a difference in understanding, that is all. All the different isms, cults, and creeds, all the different angles of all beliefs, are all good, for they will eventually lead their followers to the realization that underneath all there is a deep factor of actuality that has been missed. A deep something that has not been contacted, or they have failed to contact that which rightly belongs to them, which they can and should rightfully possess. We see it as this very thing that will eventually drive man to possess all. The very fact that man knows there is something to possess, which can be possessed and which he has not, will goad him on until he has it. It is in this way every step in advance is made in all things. The idea is first pressed out from God's into man's consciousness, and he sees there is something ahead if he will but go on. Here man usually blunders and fails to recognize the source from which the idea came, but thinks that it came wholly from within himself. He gets away from God and, instead of letting God express through him the perfection God sees for him, he goes on and expresses in his own way and brings forth imperfectly the thing which should be perfectly wrought or manifest. If he should but realize that every idea is a direct, perfect expression from God, and, as soon as this idea comes to him, he would immediately make it his ideal to be expressed from God. Then take his mortal hands off and let God express through him the perfect way, this ideal would come forth perfect. Here we must realize that God is above the mortal and the mortal cannot help in any way. In this way man would learn in a short time to express perfection. The one great thing man must learn is to get forever through and out of the psychic or mind forces and express directly from God. For all psychic forces are created wholly by man and they are likely to mislead. Chapter 16. Here the talk ended with the understanding that all should meet at breakfast. We were up early next morning and ready for breakfast at 6:30. As we left our lodging, we met our friends going in the same direction, walking along and conversing the same as ordinary mortals. They greeted us and we voiced our surprise at meeting them in this way. The reply was, "We are only men the same as you. Why do you persist in looking upon us as different? We are in no way different from you, we have only developed our God-given powers to a greater extent than you." We then asked, "Why can we not do the works that we have seen you do?" They answered, "Why do not all we contact follow on and do the works? We cannot and do not wish to force our way upon anyone, all are free to live and go the way as they wish to go. We try only to show the easy and simple way, the way we have tried and found very satisfactory." We went to breakfast and the conversation drifted into the ordinary everyday occurrences. I became lost in wonder. Here were 4 men sitting opposite us at table. There was one that had lived upon this earth about 1,000 years. He had so perfected his body that he was able to take it with him wherever he desired. His body still retained the buoyancy and youth of a man of 35 years, and this perfection had been completed about 2,000 years. Next to him sat a man that was the 5th in line or regular descendant of the family first mentioned. The second had lived upon this earth for more than 700 years and his body did not appear to be a day over 40. They were able to converse with us the same as any other men would converse. There was Emil who had lived for over 500 years and appeared to be about 40, and Jast who was about 40 and appeared to be about that age. All were conversing together like brothers with not a hint of superiority, all kindly, simple, and yet well grounded and logical in every word uttered. With no trace of the mystical or mysterious about them, just plain human beings in daily intercourse with each other. Still I could scarcely realize that it was not all a dream. After breakfast, when we arose from the table, one of my associates started to pay for the meal. Emil said, "You are our guests here," and held out to the lady in attendance what we thought was an empty hand. But when we looked a second time, there was just the amount of money necessary to pay the bill. We found that our friends did not carry money with them, neither did they depend on others for their supply. When money was needed, it was right at hand, created from the universal. We walked out of the house and the man that was with the number 5 party shook hands with us, saying that he must return to his party, and disappeared. We made a note of the time of his disappearance and afterwards found that he appeared with his party within 10 minutes after he had left us. We spent the day with Emil, Jast, and our friend of the records, as we called him, in wandering over the village and the countryside. Our friend recounting in detail many instances which happened in the time of John's sojourn of 12 years in the village. In fact, so vividly were these instances brought to our minds that it seemed as if we were back in the dim past, walking and talking with this great soul, who, to us before this, had seemed but a mythical character conjured from the minds of those who wished to mystify. From that day on, John the Baptist had been a real living character. So real to me it seems as if I can now actually see him walking the streets of the village and countryside and receiving the instruction of those great souls about him. The same as we walked the streets of the village and countryside that day, yet not able to grasp the fundamental truth of it all. After tramping all day, listening to the most interesting historical occurrences, and hearing records read and translated on the very spot where the incidents took place thousands of years before, we returned to the village just before dark, thoroughly tired. The 3 friends who were with us and had walked every step of the way as we had walked were not showing the least sign of fatigue or weariness. Whereas we were begrimed, dust-laden, and perspiring, they were cool and at ease. Their garments were as white and fresh and spotless as when we started out in the morning. We had noted during all our journeys with these people that none of their clothing became oiled. We had remarked about this a great many times but had received no reply until this evening when, in answer to a remark made, our friend of the records said, "This may seem remarkable to you but it seems far more remarkable to us that one speck of God's created substance adheres to another of God's creations where it is not wanted and where it does not belong. With the right concept this could not happen, for no part of God's substance can be misplaced or placed where it is not wanted." Then, in an instant we realized that our clothing and bodies were as clean as theirs were. The transformation, for to us it was a transformation, had taken place instantly to all 3 alike while we stood there. All fatigue left us and we were as refreshed as though we had arisen from bed and had our morning bath. Here was the answer to all our questions. I believe we retired that night with the deepest feeling of peace we had experienced at any time thus far throughout our sojourn with these people. And our feeling of awe was fast giving place to the deepest love for these simple, kindly hearts that were doing so much for the benefit of mankind, or their brothers, as they call them. We began to look upon them as brothers. They took no credit upon themselves, saying it was God expressing through them, "Of myself I can do nothing. The Father that dwelleth within me, he doeth the works."